Hey guys, Thomas the Genie here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie The Last Voyage of the Demeter. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server, where you join, collab, and chill, and all that cool stuff. And shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Now, I have not seen any trailers for this, surprisingly. The only reason I had known about it is that I had only started to see a few reviews pop up in my feed, and then I went to go watch it after the fact. I didn't actually watch any of the reviews. I just went, oh, that could be a thing I could go watch, and yeah. Here we are. So, with that out of the way, and with zero prep in knowing what this movie would be about, other than Dracula, the movie begins in 1897. I believe it takes place, at least initially, in Russia, and is moving individuals to somewhere in England, or is in England moving elsewhere. Nonetheless, this is apparently also based off of some novel that I'm not familiar with either. But the movie does begin with the ending of it having unfolded. We see the boat come in and have it be utterly destroyed. So, and the only thing that is left for them to sort of pick apart is this writing that was sort of a warning. But we cut to 4 weeks prior. Now, obviously, this is a type of method certain movies can use of jumping in front of sort of the end conclusion to draw in the hook. It's supposed to draw in the questions of how a boat would end up like that, and so on and so forth. So, not the worst deployment of it I have seen. In fact, I have some admiration for this movie, while also having some criticisms, which we'll get to along the way. But for now, a pretty decent opening, and it gets us to sort of, delve into these opening questions. As, again, we cut to 4 weeks beforehand, when this boat was initially being sent off. We are at the docks, and we're seeing that the captain and his crew are looking for some men to hire on, because they don't have enough crewmates currently on board, and they're even willing to pay. So, early capitalism at its finest. But nonetheless, we get one of the passengers, who ends up being the main character, named Clemens, saving this young kid from a falling thing that, I believe it's like a barrel or something, or I forget what exactly it is, but he saves him, and he's like the son of the captain, actually, as it turns out. And one of the men that they initially got to be additive to the crew sees a symbol that freaks him up so much so that he leaves. Now being an additional one man short, the captain points to Clemens, who had already shown that he had interest in wanting to, be a part of this crew, is now initiated officially, whereas beforehand his knowledge wasn't quite enough to get him on board, as it takes more than that, aka a more physical labored job to facilitate being on a boat. And I would know, being on someone who has been on one of those boat sort of, I guess I'll call them reenactment things, where they have you actually set the sails and sleep out the actual hammocks and do all that stuff. I've actually experienced what it's like, and I can tell you from I guess first-hand experience of that is that it is indeed a physically demanding job. So, anyways, the boat begins to sail off with everyone making their way on board. We learn that the kid's name is Toby, and we have a little cute doggo named Huck. And some of the other crew are sort of introduced here as well as the captain, who narrates through portions of the movie as well to get his frame of mind out of the way. And speaking of the crew, we have an early scene here where there's just Eden chilling, essentially kind of shooting the shit a little bit here. And I do think that this scene was a little bit paced too quickly, honestly. I think slowing this bit down by even a few minutes could have drawn out each of these characters specifically, as I actually don't know a lot of their names other than the ones I could hear and then write down for sake of just trying to remember them. But that is something that I do feel is the downside and the main criticism of the movie, is that unfortunately the majority of the cast still feels like that typical, just current day, just leave your characters to be death fodder rather than interesting characters. Now, that isn't a guilt of every character in this movie, so that's the plus side, is that the main character is indeed fleshed out. We do have Toby, who, while a kid, who has a bit going on himself. The captain, who does seem to have, indeed, quite a tale, being the narrator throughout, and also wanting to this be his final mission, as it were. But the rest of the crew doesn't feel like the rest of them get as well fleshed out as I would have liked. So a little bit more flesh on the bones on that scene while they're just sort of shooting the shit. They do talk about what they want to do with the money, so we can kind of get little bits of their character here. But it's just not quite enough, if I ask me. Again, I think they could have expanded a few minutes on this here. As we cut to what Clemens wants, he wants to understand the world, and the captain says the world is something not to be fully understood, but rather experienced. And I don't think that there's a problem with having a balance of those two things, of trying to understand the world while simultaneously trying to experience it. I think that's sort of the yin and yang sort of duality of what makes the world what it is trying to understand your place within it while also experiencing it simultaneously. So I do think that they both bring a equally interesting aspect of parts of the world that are very broad, and I don't think one should be looked down upon the other rather than being seen as equal. So the crew eat and do their dining, and we have all that. However, we do begin to start to see the seams start to crawl out of the simple sort of, we're just having a grand old time, as Clem begins to, while Toby is near down the bottom of the boat, the animals begin to freak out. This gets Clem to begin to inspect around the area, and he finds a woman on board who is nearly dead. Both him and the kid both check up on her, And meanwhile, while our crew is looking around, one man, again, not named, or if it was named, I don't remember who it is, sees his first sighting of what clearly is what's on top of this poster, which is this vamp-looking thing, but he looks up from it, not seeing it anymore, so not sure if his mind was playing tricks on him, or if that was really real. And we do indeed get Clem checking in up with this guy. We get this other bearded guy. I think most of them were bearded, which made them hard to distinguish from each other, even in my notes. Indeed, reinforces that there is someone else on this boat. We see, while we are below, we see that the dog is barking at something, and then his barking becomes more scared, and then he is cut. And then we get an instant abrupt cut of it falling to silence. Then we see the result of that being the chef finds Huck dead. Very reminiscent of Alien or Aliens, which is a really high praise. And I know what you're thinking, like, damn, you're praising an animal dying in this movie? Like, what the fuck? Animal cruelty, right? Well, you know, I also simultaneously think this is fantasy, and, you know, we have to allow movies to sort of, you know, break the mold of going back to what they used to be. I think a part of that is, especially with horror, I feel like there has been this sort of caged up feeling about killing off certain types of people, and I reinforce that with something that later on is going to happen in this movie, but I'll hold off on that for now. But I will say, I will praise it once again when it comes to that, is that I do think that this movie has brought back that audacity to not let off these characters, not, you know, just because it is, you know, a dog, that doesn't guarantee its safety by some bullshit or shenanigans, just because it, in other cases, in other characters, that doesn't guarantee anything, in fact, as we'll, again, later learn on. But unfortunately, Clem is sort of blamed in this circumstance, but he kind of, like, claps back, saying that wouldn't make any sort of sense with how everything has been sort of been unfolding in front of them. Of course, Clem checks in with Toby once again, who is crying because that was his dog primarily, and is, you know, kind of distraught at the thought of all of that. I wrote one of the characters' names, but I'm not sure if I don't know if the pronunciation will come out correctly, Ogoroi, or something along those lines. And Clem talked about how he was the one who initially saw the face, or the figure, and how he knows for sure that this is probably the result of whatever that was. And we get some more narration from the captain, essentially talking about how the crew is indeed falling into despair, or starting to at the very most. So we focus in on Toby and Clem with this woman, who we still don't know much about her. And we learn that even the rats have gone off, as displayed by the chef, who claims as such. We see that a hole is formed by the top side of the boat cage of, like, I guess this is where you would, like, store your crates initially and then seal him off is where this is. But this blonde-haired man, again, non-discrete, non-named, is killed. So we have now more deaths popping up. And Clem works his way up, and I wrote Chovsky. I remember that guy's name. Was up on the deck. And we have even more suspicion placed on Clem from Vorchek, who is in like the second in command of the ship, essentially. The woman finally awakens and screams, getting the attention back sort of elsewhere. And the captain, once again, taking over the narration about how things have gotten, proportionally even worse, essentially. When confronted from her, she talks about how he is here and refers to him as Dracula, so that name has now been confirmed in the movie officially. And Clem is warned officially as well, with her imparting this warning to him. So Dracula, I'll just refer to the creature as that from now on moving forward, moves up during the rainstorm, and we see that Andra is now missing. And two of the crew now hear a knock, which in this particular boat, the way that they would signal each other, which is established relatively early on in the movie from Toby, in fact, is that the knocking of the wood can send a vibration throughout the wood of the boat and could essentially get other people's attention. So that is how essentially they hear the noise and move toward it and prep to attack. But that doesn't obviously go their way really well. One of them climbs up to the mast, or the I forget what it's called, like the upper den of like where you look out. It's been a while, so I don't remember all the boat terms off the top of my head, so I do apologize on that. But anyway, so he's trying to his best to avoid Dracula. However, when Toby arrives on the scene and looks up, he has blood falling on him, and indeed they see that he has been at least chomped down on. And the captain, once again, talks about how these injuries have even worsened their abilities, as well as them running out of food and supply from even earlier. So just things getting constantly worse and worse. And the captain, even though they don't really pay heed to this warning persistently throughout the film, which is a little bit annoying, at least he does initially give the check of like, hey, from now on, 2 men for every watch, and to be armed always. And immediately, in fact, one of them goes off looking on their own, which is like, oh, for fuck's sake, like, you just said to have them go 2 by 2, and the immediate scene is one guy looking on his own. It's like, what? Why'd you even bother doing that if you're going to have people ignore your says and whatnot? So that's always an annoying part of the film. However, we see that one of the men who is bit, the one that was up above, his eyes turn white to indicate that he is turning into a thrall, I suppose I'll call it. And another crate is shown to potentially show that Dracula may not be the only one in there. So we see that Toby begins looking around, and Algorium, or however you pronounce his name, moves in. He is the one who has been bit, nonetheless, and is now trying to drag Toby away. And so he runs up and locks the door to, like, the captain's quarter, or, like, one of the rooms anyway. And the chef hears the noise, as I indicated earlier, from the ship, hearing Toby's knock, and them trying to reach him in time. And Clem is the first to arrive on the scene, seeing the thrall, Elgarom. He's tackled down, and Toby unfortunately sees Dracula, though, the main one, obviously. And they all now see Dracula, so now they all have a very clear glimpse of what he is. And not too long later, he officially bites Toby. The kid, yes. As I just acknowledged about the dog, they're not afraid of killing a kid in the movie. And again, I feel like that is something that used to be something that horror movies could get away with, and then it always felt like those two things in particular, for a long time in horror movies, had to be always protected. You couldn't kill them off. In fact, I would say the stretch of that was a lot longer than I thought. And then the first show that broke that method initially was The Walking Dead. For all of its faults, The Walking Dead didn't hold back in that department at the very most, despite its faults. So it had that going on for it too, that it was willing to go back to a time of that classic no one is safe sort of demeanor, which I much prefer, as long as you, alongside that, strengthen the means of each character. I think both of those things need to be in tandem to make a better horror movie. And what we have here is a decent horror movie with some, cracks and holes and not as well established characters, so I'm willing to put that out there. Anyway, we see the woman, whose name we don't know, by the way, still at this point. At least that's what I wrote in my notes. I believe I write her name when they say her name. So she shoots her way in, and we learn that they have 5 days left to arrive to their location. And currently they have Algorum tied to the mast, and the sun comes up and he burns like a vintage vampire. So that is established now in the movie. And the crew, or at least the majority, if not all of them, witness this, so they are all in disbelief and in silence, because, geez, they know nothing of this creature, and it just possessed someone they knew, and then that person just burns in the sun. It's like, all of this is just new information that is just being processed continuously. And I do appreciate that about the film, is that the film does present sort of this relentless, after the initial sort of, lull in safety, this sort of relentless attitude of, we're not gonna let up now. And Clem, seeing this now, warns about Toby, seeing how he was bit too. And he wants to check the rest of the crates just to make sure there aren't any other surprises. This is where we learn Anna's name, I believe it is, joins him in the fray once again. The chef, seeing time and time again crewmate after crewmate just disappearing or dying, decides that he's gonna go fuck off. He goes on one of the lifeboats and just starts to try to paddle away. And I gotta admit, seemed like a pretty noble or a pretty supported idea. I suppose the timing is what fucked him, essentially, and, well, the fact that the creature can fly. That being Dracula, of course. But they did not know that prior. He did not know that prior. They had only seen the creature on the floor thus far. So, despite all of that, the only knowledge they had seemed to have had up to this point is that it seems to be a lot docile during the day, which is what prompts me for this criticism of he should have probably waited to do what he was trying to do during the day. Like, as soon as the light hits the surface of, where he can see it, ensuring his safety, he probably would have managed to get significantly further on his little broke crusade if he had done so. But nonetheless, we cut back to the crate situation only to find that the rest of them are empty, and to see that the one with the dragon seal is the one that has the cane in it. And we cut back to the chef, who is hearing all these noises around him, and of course we see his ill-fatedness when Dracula swoops in from above. The rest of the group regroups, though, and second in command, Voyage, is told that he would indeed have made a great captain if things would have turned out better, and not like this thing that has been falling apart at the seams. And meanwhile, the captain is talked to by Clems about Toby, because he swears he sees Toby move. Clems tries to despair him by saying that's just his eyes playing tricks. The woman, Anne, sends a quick prayer, and when the captain is still in so disbelief, he removes the cloth, but it is daytime, so Toby's body burns off as it is tossed off into the water, capping off his death officially in the movie, as in he could have probably even survived as a thrall, even possibly, but nope, he was also burned. And in the process, because the captain was so close, he is also slightly burned, a little bit, but not like a vampire, obviously, just off of the burns from his son. And so we take a little detour, and we see that Voyage and Clem are having a little bit of a spat down below. And Clem goes off about how he was one of the first Black Doctors, and considering the date this takes place in, I think that would track. If I remember 1897, I think that would definitely track. And I have to find where I was back in the day, and how much of a hardship that would have been, even more so back then. And I suppose it's even more interesting considering other elements, but that's for history buffs to go into, I suppose, or whatever. Anyway, so Clem updates the Cap, who now has a cocked gun. He is talked down from killing himself because he doesn't feel like he has anything left to live for. And Clem puts together that Dracula has been killing them one by one, or close to that, per night. So by the time they arrived, they would have, since there were so few of them with 5 days remaining, there probably wouldn't have been much left anyway, if they had just remained as is and tried to just go by off with that. However, their pursuit gets two men additionally attacked by a flyby Dracula kill, at least in one of them. And Vorchek, the second in command, is now knocked down and bit. We see the captain take the helm and see Dracula, and the captain is bit. So we are just losing members left and right now. In fact, it would appear at this juncture that Clem and Anna are the only two remaining characters left. So he yells out, trying to get Dracula's attention, and he swoops down, and Anna fires at him, and Clem is only dragged temporarily, but luckily he's, not swooped in completely. She cuts, the top of the helm off with an axe or whatever to crush him underneath it, while the two of them dive into the water. However, once just sort of drifting upon the sea, Clem sees that Anna, her eyes begin to turn white. This was indicative of she must have been bitten beforehand, and what Clem provided her, which was these blood transfusion, only de-escalated the time, or added a little bit of additional time, rather, to her clock to be turned into a thrall/vampire on her own. So she says that, I'd rather just go out dying and not be that. So she drifts off on her own to see the sun come up once again, and she indeed burns up. We cut to Clem hitting the land on his own, and we hear his narration as he knows that Dracula has made his presence here quite knowingly. By the end of the movie, taking on a more sort of regal sort of form, or humanoid even form, with cane in hand. But Clem promises to hunt him down. And that is the end of the last voyage of the Demeter. And with that promise of that hunt, I almost was were they trying to prescribe Van Helsing here? Because that's usually the character you would describe to be Dracula's, slayer, if anything. But who knows? I don't know what follows this up in terms of books, so I don't know if there's a sequel or anything in the terms of the book series. So I don't know. I mean, it clearly seems like they're trying to sequel up something here, but I don't know what that is. It would probably have to be something either different from Van Helsing, obviously, or maybe it could include Van Helsing, and then he partners up with Van Helsing. I don't know if that's something that is going to be pursued in the next movie. I don't know any of these answers, but for this movie, I think I'm going to go with either a 5 or sliding towards 6 out of 10. And I lean a little bit closer to the positive because of the little character moments they have with the main character of Clem and the captain and Toby, but doesn't guarantee the safety of characters like Toby, as an example of they are not coddled, they are not with heavy plot armor, they are absolutely vulnerable to attack and can absolutely be taken out, and are done so with that in mind. But there is the rest of the crew, which, I'm not going to say they were empty, I just would have had it a little bit more meat in the earlier segment in the movie, where they're sort of having that chill moment before the calm, in this case, hits the storm. I think expanding upon that, even if by a few minutes, could have really resolved a lot of the issue of that sort of emptiness that I yearn for in these horror movies of late, including this one to a degree. But overall, I still think the attempt was better off than a lot of other things I have seen within the horror genre, so I'm willing to give it that at the very most. And that is my full review of The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server. You can join, collab, and chill and do all that cool stuff, and until next time everyone, bye-bye!